Welcome back to the Profit Builder. And this video will be our last in this series on the topic of how to plug the profit leaks in your contracting business. In today's video, I'm interviewing my client, Aaron Gordon, on the topic of cost to complete. And Aaron shares with you his story of when he wasn't doing cost to complete and how starting to do that in his contracting business was transformational in their ability to be able to be more profitable on projects consistently, and how it really helped him build a stronger team and better project managers in the process. So let me go ahead and share that video and that interview with you. As a contractor, have you ever experienced getting towards the end of the job and seeing that your revenue and your cash in has run out, but your actual costs have continued to be accrued? And have you ever lost money on a project and really would like to know how to never have that happen again? Hi, I'm Vicki Suter with Suter Business Builders, and today we're going to talk all about how do you actually get control over the bottom line of your projects while they are in process by doing cost to completes. And today I'm interviewing my client, Aaron Gordon with AGC. And we're going to talk, I've got some questions that I'm going to ask him, but Aaron is going to actually walk you through how he approaches doing cost to complete on projects in his business. He's going to talk about what are some of the challenges he had to overcome as he started doing that in his company, and what he's done to teach and train his team to be able to do that effectively as well. So enjoy today's interview with Aaron, and we're going to jump in. I'm really excited to have Aaron Gordon with AGC here with me today as my guest. And Aaron is a general contractor in the San Francisco Bay Area and is a longtime client. And he's going to be talking to us today about cost to complete and why do cost to complete. But before we kind of jump into the questions, Aaron, first of all, thank you for being here. And would you tell people a little bit about you? Give them a little bit of introduce yourself.
Yeah, Aaron Gordon with Aaron Gordon Construction. I'm a general contractor in the San Francisco Bay Area. Been in business approximately 22 years, and been working with Vicki, I think, about 10 years now. Or is it longer?
It's actually longer, yeah.
Wow. I have three companies: Aaron Gordon Construction, 415 Remodeling, and Heirloom Builders. The other two are smaller companies that I'm part owner in. And yeah, excited to talk about CTC and my journey to get here.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm just listening to you talk a little bit there, Aaron. I have so appreciated watching you in your journey of growing as a contractor and as a leader and a business owner. And this whole topic of cost to complete is clearly one of those things that I watched you, and I've watched a lot of contractors, right? It's like, it's the difference that makes the difference. And rather than me talk about cost to complete, why is it important? I am really excited to have you be talking about it from a practical point of view that's relatable, to people who are there on the ground. Because sometimes it can feel a bit complicated. But before I kind of jump in there, maybe it would be good for us to just start at defining what is doing a cost to complete. So before I jump into more specifics about that, what is cost to complete? And maybe you can just define that for people.
That's an easy one. You've got cash basis where, you do your invoicing, you have expenses come in, and your profit is the difference between the two, right? And the problem is if your subs don't send in invoices or somebody loses invoices, you can show a huge profit one month and then a huge loss the next month. So cost to complete is simply about bridging the gap between your expenses and your revenue to actually show how much money you're making at any given point in time. So for us, we do it monthly, and gauging how much money we're making or losing on a monthly basis for a general contractor is no easy feat, because there's so many variables that have to do with what we make. For example, are you actually on budget on your job? Are you hitting your schedule? If you're not hitting your schedule, you're not actually hitting your budget. And being aware of your budget and being aware of where you are at any given time is a big challenge. And it's probably the single most important thing for a general contractor to do.
I would concur. It's that whole thing of, and this is what you're describing. If I can see it before if I can see into the future and see where I'm going to end up before it's history, I can do something about it. I have way more control over it. But if you're only looking, it's kind of like driving a car in the rearview mirror. If you're only looking at results on projects post-mortem or after it's already done, you can't do anything about that. But what you can do something about is what's in front of you. And cost to complete is the number one way for a contractor to be able to stop, lift up your head, look out and see where you're headed, to go, okay, am I on track? Am I off track? So what now? What, like, what can I do about it? Is there something that, fell through the cracks or got dropped or what have you? And I know you're going to talk about some of those things. So let me just ask you this question. What is it that had you realize that you needed to start doing cost to complete? Because there's this point for contractors as they grow, for you to have this realization that you can't just work really hard and hope that it all turns out, or make sure that you stay on top of the paperwork and all that, without doing, at some point you realize, I've got to do this look ahead and this to complete. What was that moment for you? How did you realize, oh, I need to start doing this?
Yeah, well, so when I was a smaller contractor, I would pretty much not look at the job until it was done, and I'd add up the costs, and I'd look at the revenue, and you just subtract the cost from the revenue, and there's your profit for that particular job. You have no idea how you're doing during the job, but at the end, you kind of look at it and go, okay, we did okay. And if the job wasn't done, we didn't really think about it. When I say we, it was just me in the office. So as we grew, I think we were around 2.8 million. I brought in a office manager who was doing all the bookkeeping, and we're growing, and we're looking at our monthly profit, where I never really looked at that before. I didn't close a month, I closed a year. Right. So when you're starting to close months, you're looking, you're like, wow, one month we made $200,000, and we're doing a dance and we're super happy. And it was like unbelievable, like how you can be that small and make that much money in a month. And then the next month we lost 200,000. And you're looking around, and you're like, what happened? How did we make 200 and lose 200? And clearly you start to realize that your expenses don't match up with your revenue, and you're getting, the revenue in this month and the expenses that month. And, it depends how you set up your billing cycle with your clients. When you're doing milestone billing, you get a huge payment, and you may have already spent the money, so you show a massive profit. So really, being unsatisfied with that roller coaster profit and loss, and then starting to really not know where we are at any given time, and not wanting to wait till the end of the year. And even at the end of the year, you still can't really balance it, because you have to draw the line in the sand somewhere. So just not wanting to deal with the roller coaster of big profit, big loss, and wanting to have control over what the numbers look like. So I was clear, I could go home and tell my wife, like, hey, we made a profit.
And mean it.
Yes. And actually know it.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. I think you just touched on a couple of really important things. And one is, it's like there's the roller coaster of the P&L, right? The profitability of your business. That's a little crazy making, but emotionally it's exhausting.
oh yeah.
And that whole not knowing, and that whole like sense of uncertainty, creates an enormous amount of anxiety and chasing after things, because you're trying to maintain control, because you don't have a vision or a view of the bigger picture of what's going on the job. And and the example you just gave about, like, it can end up that a year looks really good. And I just had this happen with somebody this year, where last year they were like, oh my gosh, it's so great, and it looked like an amazing year. And then this year, by like February, that job that was so amazing just hit, like all the money ran out, and all of a sudden they had to keep paying these bills for subcontractors and labor to finish the job. The example being what you said of, yeah, we build it early on and we weren't doing cost to complete. And then, it's so disappointing. So it's that way of eliminating that roller coaster, that emotional uncertainty, that emotional distress that comes from not knowing, and having a greater sense of clarity. And I will add one more thing, and then when we'll go on to my next question. But the thing that, and I think you would concur with this, but add to it if you want, like the thing about when we have that greater sense of clarity about what's going on in our business or on jobs, like that clarity gives us more confidence, lets us take more powerful actions. And that clarity comes from data, right? When we have good
Absolutely.
data.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're selling work and you're confident and you know that you can produce work and you have the right budget and you can do it well, it gives you the confidence to sell the next job for sure. Yeah.
A lot of times people think that struggle in sales has to do with that, people don't want what they have, or their price, people say their prices are too high, or so on and so forth. But the truth is, people sniff out our uncertainty and there's that hesitancy that people have with engaging with us when they see that we are not confident and we're not grounded and clear. So it's a mental thing that can really help in every area of your business by just having that clarity. Yeah. So let's talk about cost to complete. I know that you're going to share your screen, you're going to walk through some pieces here, but before you do that, can you just talk about what are the elements of doing cost to complete? Sort of give us what your approach is and what your thinking is about it. And then if you would share your screen, let's look at a sample of cost to complete and kind of give people, I'm not trying to do a training here, right? But like give people an overview of like, what are the big elements to think about that you want to make sure to have included in it?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, it starts with proper cost coding. So if you don't have your cost coding down, if you don't have all of those systems in place, you can't do a CTC. And if your team is not cost coding properly, you can't do a real CTC, or you can, but the outcome's not gonna net the result you're looking for. So, the first thing we did before we did a CTC or ever thought about it was get our cost coding in place. And it comes from ownership. You got to really be diligent. You got to have a budget in place, and you got to have your cost coding down. And
when you say cost coding, just to be clear, you're talking about job costing.
Yeah, job costing. Okay. Correct. So we started job costing and requiring everybody to cost code long before we really used the data to our advantage, just because we knew we have to get used to this. We have to get everybody on the same page and everybody cost coding their time and their materials and subs correctly. So, having a good budget to start with and then having accurate cost coding is a requirement to being able to be successful at a CTC. So once that's done, then you have to put the data in one place to be able to utilize it. And it's really no easy feat either. There's so much information and it's coming from so many different places. And, you need to know what's committed and what's not committed and how much you have left over in these cost codes. And if you have a cost code and a budget for something and it's got, a committed cost with a sub, you think, oh, great, we're on budget. But if there's 10 other items that get cost coded to that code and you are only looking at your data over here and not your data over there, you're going to be off. So really understanding, okay, we've got this stuff committed and we have potential money coming from these other areas that are going to get cost coded. And I'm kind of getting into the weeds here, but it's really critical that you're on top of where the costs are, where they're going, and when they get coded, to be able to look at them and say, okay, these were cost coded wrong. Let's move them to the right cost code so we can then put our CTC together. And, when we first started doing this, our estimating division was creating really difficult budgets to follow. So when you create your budget, if the budget's a mess, if things are coded wrong, if things are off in the budget, same thing, the CTC is going to be a mess. And we would have these meetings where we'd spend hours moving things into the right place because that's what the billing said, right? And
so am I hearing you correctly? Because I just want to pause here for just a second, because I think what you're talking about is super important. And what you're saying is you want to make sure that you have a budget that is by cost code, and that you're then job costing according to those cost codes as you're going along doing the work, whether it's labor, subs, material, what have you. And I think that what you're making is a really good point, which is there's an alignment between how it's estimated and how that job flows in terms of work, in terms of those cost codes, that they are ones that the field can actually track their time at. And I think a good example of that, and maybe you have some others too, is like with labor. I always say, hey, if you have labor that's coding to more than 2 cost codes in any day, you're probably not getting good information. Like nobody's going to track that many cost code, a lot. So like keeping it simple enough that you can get, reliable feedback that somebody's going to actually code it to that cost code, but making sure that you're using cost codes that can be job costed against. Yeah.
Yeah. And to dive more into cost codes quickly, you could just call everything carpentry, but at the end of the job, when you're looking at carpentry, you're like, wow, we really went over budget in carpentry. Was it framing? Was it finish? Was it windows? Was it this? Was it that? So we break it down into lots of subcategories, and we've worked hard to train our guys to code their time properly. It's not a perfect science.
Yeah.
Most of our guys do it on Monday morning, and they do it from memory, which drives me bonkers. But at the end of the day, you're trying to get the best information you can. But yeah, that's got to happen for you to be able to utilize the information in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah.
So do you want to share your screen? You want to walk through?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead and share my screen here. So this is a spreadsheet that we've created. So we use Sage 100, which doesn't
want to make your screen just a little bit bigger, because I'm just looking and it's a little bit.
All right. How's that?
No, if you get on your bottom right hand, yep, just a little bit bigger.
Even bigger?
There you go.
All right. So this is a CTC report. This is a program that we hired somebody to build, and essentially it goes into our software, our front of house software, Sage, grabs all the information, pulls it into a spreadsheet, and then we crunch the numbers from here. And all of our cost codes are on the left, and actually every cost is on the left. When it comes down to materials, you can see in this area here, we've got every cost, discount, builder supply, and Baronio. And you can look at these and quickly realize, like, we've got a Baronio, and electrical clearly is in the wrong spot. So that this is one way to kind of look at all the data and see if somebody entered something wrong or somebody cost coded it wrong. And that helps you get clarity on whether things are put in the right spot. Then you've just got your simple data, right? You've got your budget change orders, and then your total revised budget. So you can look at it and say, originally we had X, we had these change orders, now here's our budget. Then you've got the subcontractor section. I won't go into everything, but it's showing you, what you've got. And we even wanted to find out, like, what open payables we have. So a project manager can open this up and go, okay, we still owe this sub X. how much do I owe them? It's right here. Then we have the allowances, and in theory, an allowance should not affect the cost to complete of a job because it's a small time and materials contract inside of the bigger project. So one of the things I think that contractors do regularly, which really throws things off, is uses anything that's an allowance to affect the bottom line. So you don't have a budget for it, but you have costs, and it actually affects your bottom line. So anything that's an allowance is not calculated into the cost to complete here. Then you have your non-contracted costs and your committed costs. So it's taking everything that's committed and everything that's not committed. For example, if you have a carpenter that did a bunch of electrical work for some reason, and you've got committed costs with an electrician, you need to know that those are going to add up and you're going to be over budget if a carpenter did something that wasn't really planned on. Then we have our balance remaining. And then we have all the calculations that really show what the cost to complete is. So what we input, and we try to keep it really simple, is we look at our duration. If there's a 2-week duration and we've completed 1 week, then we're 50% complete. So we do our duration, and on all of the duration-based costs like site protection and project management and site super time, all of that stuff, expendables and debris removal, we simply just do a percentage of complete. And then we walk through each one of the cost codes. Miscellaneous framing, it says that, if you look at our numbers, we can see how much cost has come in, what our budget is. Then we kind of say to the site super and the PM, are we at 50 or 60 or 70% complete as the report is showing? And based on the dollars, no, I think we're outperforming or we're underperforming. So we go through all of those. In a lot of cases, if something's subcontracted, sheetrock, for example, in theory, you're going to be on budget if you estimate it properly. If not, if you say, oh, I know we've got, some damage that's coming down the pike, I think we're going to spend $2,000 or $3,000 more than what we're projected, then we'll show that as a negative couple of $1,000s. So it's a lot of it comes down to gut check. And at the end of the day, we look at our over under. In this case, our over under, we're under 25,600 on this project. And this number shows what our projected estimated cost would be. So after we do all this, we say we think we're going to be $138,000 total budget. And then you look back and you say, well, our budget with change orders is 163. The delta is the 25.6. So it becomes relatively simple if the data is correct. And this all assumes that you have control of the job and your schedule is tight, and that you actually are hitting your schedule and your milestones and paying attention to your over and unders.
So that is a great segue. So thank you for showing that. I think that's helpful. And, this wasn't intended to be like a whole training on it, right? But and thank you for sharing that. I just wanted people to kind of get a sense of like, what are all the elements and what are you looking for? What are you paying attention to? And I appreciate what we're talking about, gut check and about looking at the numbers and making sure that they're accurate, right? But what you just showed is a snapshot of what are all the elements of it. And there's then the segue piece of it is, okay, you've got all the data. Now, how do you get your team to actually do cost to complete? What's been your strategy for training your team to do that? And because it's not something that people wake up in the morning and go, oh, I know how to do cost to complete. Like there's certain things that have to happen before you can actually do that. And if you could just speak to that, because I know we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah. So for example, if we have a new project manager that comes on board, we'll run through this. I'll kind of go through it quickly. They'll forget 98% of what I said just because it's a big spreadsheet and it's complicated. And then as the first cost to complete for their job comes up, I'll walk them through it. We'll do it together. It does take time to learn. Again, if the schedule and the budget, so if the starting with the budget, if the budget was created and we have an appropriate budget to build the job, then at the end of the day, we're going to be on budget if we manage the job properly. So then we kind of take a look at our schedule, right? So are we on schedule? We ask the site super to pull up the schedule, look at where we are, and it's pretty easy to look at it and say, we're in sheetrock right now. Are we on the date that the original schedule shows? If so, yeah, we're on schedule. We're 37% complete based on the math, and then we start plugging those numbers in and then start talking about, all right, we have this much for finished carpentry. Where are we with finished carpentry? Oh, we haven't started finished carpentry. 0% complete, on budget. If we're finished with framing and we say, okay, we came in under, we're 97% complete on framing, you plug that in, this spreadsheet looks at the budget and it looks at the cost that came in, and it does a simple calculation, right? So that's the beauty of the Excel. It does a calculation that says if you're 97% complete and you've only spent 67% of your budget, here's where you're going to end up.
Or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So, in terms of training your team, what would you say? Well, yeah. So what would you say are two of the most important things, or what, I'm going to start that over again, Aaron. And by the way, just a reminder to look at the camera. Yeah, when you're talking. So what are when you started training your team to do cost to complete, when it wasn't just you doing it, what are some of the hurdles that you had to overcome? Like, what are a couple of the things that you realized you needed to be doing to help people really grasp it and take ownership of it? Because it's a process, right? It's like you said, the first time you explain it to them, they forget 99% of what you told them. It's a process. And I think it's just important for people to understand that this didn't just happen because you figured it out, right? Like, you figured it out, you had some pain, you had to deal with I'm tired of the roller coaster, right? Then you had to figure out, all right, what's a way that I can create cost to complete? What are the key elements? You started doing job costing. Like, you worked through figuring that out step by step. But then when it comes to training people and teaching other people how to do it, they don't necessarily understand the ramifications of not doing it, or they do, and they just haven't had the opportunity to work through it like you have. So what are some things that you do when you're training somebody new?
Try to get them to not overestimate how much is complete. I think that everybody wants to see a nice high under budget number. So they're like, oh yeah, we're 75% complete with framing, when they're really 45% complete, and just kind of not truly understanding where you are per cost code all of the time. And again, like, trying to say, like, okay, this is a best guess in a lot of cases. Let's be conservative, and trying to get people to be super conservative with where they are. Like, okay, we're 50% complete with the job. We look like we're on schedule. Do we have any buffer in the schedule, or are we right on the edge? Oh, we're right on the edge. Well, we're probably going to lose a week. So let's back up a little bit on that number. Having our office manager who's really good with numbers is critical. Like, I could not have created this spreadsheet without Brian And when we're doing the CTCs, he has such a strong grasp of this. And when a PM or site super is like, oh, I think this, that, or other, like, there's some gut instinct that just comes with doing this enough times where he'll say, yeah, I don't think that's right. Let's talk about this again, and let's go through this again.
That's great.
We've done cost to completes on jobs that take hours to do because you're trying to literally estimate every single cost code individually to figure out where you are. And after somebody's done this 6 or 8, 10, 12 times, it becomes much easier. I'd like to see them take about 30 minutes per job. For a job, 2 to 3 million, let's say a $15 million job is going to take longer.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a little bit of seat time. You got to do it. And it's Brian and I working with the employee to make sure that they comprehend the big picture and then the small picture.
Yeah. Great. I think that's really smart, involving your finance person who's grounded in the numbers, who can kind of just be a more logical or objective perspective on what the numbers show, or where do they see that. The other thing we were talking about earlier too, Aaron, I hear you have talked about this throughout this conversation, is the schedule. Like having a good schedule is critically important for you to be able to do cost to complete, because it's your baseline of like, well, where are we and what do we have yet to get do from a scheduling point of view is going to help with doing the cost to complete.
That's the most important thing. I mean, if your schedule is not accurate, then none of this is going to be accurate. It's a bit of a waste of time. Even if your schedule is not accurate, you should still do the CTC and do the motions and get used to it. And then you'll start seeing like, okay, wait, we've been off on this CTC every month for 6 months. And after you do it enough times and you fail enough times, you kind of get a sense for like, you can just kind of feel like, okay, this job, I see these numbers, but based on my previous 10 cost to completes and 10 jobs, I know this one's going to go over, and I can kind of see it coming. And we'll look at the numbers, and then sometimes we'll say, yeah, we're gonna let's assume we're going to be $50,000 over budget on this job, just because it just doesn't feel like we're on, or this PM is new to this and doesn't quite understand. So, you got to start with a good budget and then a good schedule. If the budget's no good,
everything else is off.
Or if your budget's no good, then you should be able to see it going over every month, and you can just kind of see, wow, we're losing every month. That it's growing and growing and growing. And when CTCs, you can kind of also see when every month your over budget grows and grows and grows and grows, then you're just kind of catching up from all of the information that you're not clear on.
Yeah, it's driving with looking in the rear view mirror.
So if we have 2 months where the CTC has changed, we're like, okay, we've got 2 months where we see a big change, something's wrong. And then we'll take a deeper dive into the job. We'll take a deeper dive into the budget. We'll take a deeper dive into the schedule, and then we'll start looking for the change orders. Right? Like, okay, and that's another one, right? So if you got a good budget and you got a good schedule, and your CTCs or your change orders aren't happening regularly, and or they're not getting input, or sometimes we're like, okay, we've got a big change order coming, but we're still working on all this information. As you're building it and the costs are piling up, it's going to throw the whole CTC off. So you've really got to have your change orders, happening regularly. Try not to do bigger change orders. Try to break them up into smaller sections, get that into production, and that'll allow your cost to complete to be more accurate in the long run.
Yeah, it's a really great point. So thank you for all that, because I think what the picture that you just drew, which is you got to be kind of patient, and you learn and you do it and you learn and you do it and you learn. And after over a period of time, like you said, you start to get that gut sense of, does that really make sense? Does it not make sense? Taking into account, I got a new PM on this job. There's this level of complexity to, and then that whole thing of, are the change orders all actually recorded and in there? Because that's an important piece that will give you more accurate data.
Yeah.
This has been great. So my final question to you, for those people, contractors who are listening, who are watching, if you were to give them like just one small step forward from here, like what's the recommendation that you would have about a way to start to move towards doing cost to complete? What's your advice?
Well, it depends where they are, right? If you're not cost coding, then start cost coding. If you don't have good scheduling, get good at scheduling, right? Those are two critical things to be able to even begin doing a cost to complete. So, it's garbage in, garbage out. So work on the basics. Make sure that you've got your cost codes. Make sure that your change order process is solid, right? Like it can't tell you how many times you see change orders happening and it doesn't get put into the computer, or change orders or get missed, or somebody doesn't get it signed, and the whole change order process is a whole different ball game to get.
Maybe that'll be our next interview.
Yeah,
Just about change orders. Yeah.
The change order is a whole science of making sure it gets done properly and tracked. So those are the things that are necessary to be able to do a real cost to complete and be successful and actually come out with a number that is useful. And we are very accurate with our CTCs these days. We can see things coming, and it allows us to make really smart decisions about how we manage the job. If we're under budget by a good margin, there's something that's a gray area with a client, we're going to say, okay, we've got some budget, we're going to give it to you, and you kind of look like a hero. But if you're way under or way over budget and things aren't looking good, then you've got to start drawing a line in the sand with clients, and you got to start really change ordering for stuff, and you got to start letting them know, like, hey, we're really tight on our budget here. We need to start making decisions that affect all of us to keep this budget under control. And if you can see it coming, you can have those conversations with your client early.
Yeah.
And
thank you. You just, I think it's a beautiful place to bring this to closure too, Erin, which is have the difficult conversations early and often, have the reality-based discussion about where your project is really early and often, so that you have more control of the way the whole job is going. I remember one of the things that you said, when we were talking last week or the week before, and you said, if you know that your job is, that your budget when it was estimated is way off, like it gets to production and production is like, there's no way we can build this job the way that you have it estimated, that you said, we just would go, okay, let's just start at ground zero. Let's rebuild the budget so that the production crew will be held accountable, hold themselves accountable to a realistic budget, and then get over the fact that you just lost $20,000 or $100,000 or whatever it is early on. Like, have that hard conversation early on, and get a grip on the reality of where you're actually going to end up. But what it does is it gets your team in a completely different place about owning that job and owning that budget, which is going to allow it any chance of success, rather than having a crew out in the field who goes, yeah, that's just not, there's no way, we're just going to do the best we can, but we can't do that.
I mean, it's going to cost a lot less to own the overage now and give your team a goal that's achievable, because once you start looking at your budget and you realize the budget's out the window and that you're way over, then you're just in fight or flight mode, and it's like, let's just get this job done, and you're not really making smart decisions. So if you can say, like, let's take our loss now, let's give the team real numbers, then they've got something real to build with, and then they can actually switch their focus to, this is what we've got, and let's stay on this track and stay on that path, because people like to hit their budgets.
Yeah.
Guys like to hit their schedules. We all want to do that, but if you're set up for failure, it's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, morally, from a morale perspective,
Morale.
it can really make a difference in how a project goes. It can make a difference in terms of how that communication with the customer goes. It can make a difference in terms of, just overall as an organization, how it can impact your culture by being willing to have those, to be in a situation where you set people up to be able to win. And doing cost to complete, as much as sometimes that's hard, right? What it does is it surfaces a conversation early on called, okay, is there something we can do about this? We missed it in the bid, or maybe capturing a change order that didn't get captured, or we get to win, and how do we keep that money? Like, it lets us be in a different conversation early on rather than way down the road. So
yeah, if you're saying to the client early, hey, we've got a very tight budget, we're going to have to change order for everything, and we're going to be diligent. We don't want a change order, but we're in a position where if you make a change, it's going to have an effect. There's a very different conversation than, we're in a good place, and when something happens, you can throw money at a problem, make it go away very quickly, and that actually keeps the whole job on schedule and keeps you moving forward. Sometimes just saying, look, this thing's going to cost me 10 grand. It's going to keep the job moving forward. It's not worth having a conversation with the client. The plans weren't clear. Our estimate on this thing is a gray area. Let's not stop the job and fight over something that's going to cause a lot of pain with the client, and it's going to potentially impact the relationship. You just push through it. You always let them know and move forward and keep the job running.
Yeah. And that's easier to do when you have good numbers to start with, right? Like, everybody makes mistakes once in a while, but
yeah,
if you're always chasing after those dollars in terms of trying to, preserve profitability, it becomes very difficult.
It does. Yeah.
Aaron, this has been awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your experience and expertise. I think it's so great for people to be able to hear from you as a successful contractor who's been doing this for a lot of years and has a lot of experience about when it doesn't work and when it does work and how to make that shift. And so thank you for sharing with people that they could take away from this, how to do this differently for themselves as you go forward. So thanks.
You're welcome.
I hope you found my interview with Aaron to be helpful, and that you picked up some tips and ideas for how you might be able to start doing cost to complete in your business and start getting more control over the profitability of your projects, the timing of your projects, and to really build a better project management team. And this video actually wrapped up our series on how to plug the profit leaks in your contracting business. And I hope that you have found these to be very helpful to you, and that you've walked away with some ideas and ways to be able to increase the profitability and plug those profit leaks in your contracting business. Each of the videos, if you haven't watched them, I encourage you could always go back and look at them. They will be on my blog. The series will be labeled the same, so you can always go back and look at them again. Also, in almost every video, there's some free resource or tool that you can download to help you implement what you've learned in this series. So make sure to go get those as well, because that can really help you in terms of plugging those profit leaks. If you're wanting to take your contracting business to the next level, and you're looking for some other tools and resources that will continue to support you on this journey, you might want to check out my book, The Profit Bleed: How Managing Margin Can Save Your Contracting Business. In it, I share with you a deeper dive into all of what we've been talking about in the series about how to plug the profit leaks in your contracting business. And within it, there are also a lot of tools and resources that you can download for free that will help you implement the learning that's throughout the book. Again, that's the Profit Bleed, How Managing Margin Can Save Your Contracting Business. You can find it on Amazon, or feel free to just do a search on that name and that'll bring you to the book page. All right, we'll look forward to seeing you next time on The Profit Builder.